The search is changing in the blink of an eye. AI mode's here, no need to ask why. It's shifting the game, reworking the tune. Local biz gotta move or face the monsoon. Webinar lights are shining so bright, breaking it down under digital night. What's the move? What's the plan for you? AI's in the driver's seat, now what will you do? We're diving deep in this AI stream. New tools, new rules, reshaping the dream. Search is alive, it's a brand new day. Local biz, rise up, don't fade away. Algorithms dance, they're on the prowl. Old tactics crumble, hear the crowd howl. It's time to adapt, time to reframe. Get in the zone or lose the game. Questions fly like sparks in the air. What's next for us? Does anyone care? Crack the code, find the hidden way. Webinar wisdom will save the day. We're diving deep in this AI stream. New tools, new rules, reshaping the dream. Search is alive, it's a brand new day. Local biz, rise up, don't fade away.
Today's webinar is hosted by Julia Allenson, who has spent years in the local marketing industry, working as a marketer in-house for a large property management company, then at an agency, then on the tech provider side at Soushi and now Merchant, where she is the Chief Success Officer. The first panelist today is Brad Wetherall, who is the former director of Google Business Profiles at Google. While at Google for a decade, Brad oversaw the Google Business Profile and its interaction with Google Search and Google Maps. Brad is one of the world-leading experts in all things local SEO. Finally, Brad is joined by his co-panelist, Justin Silverman, who founded Merchant in 2019 and spearheaded its product innovation to bring to market its Page AI agent, which now manages local SEO for thousands of digital agencies and SMBs. 2025 is proving to be a big change year for local marketing, so let's jump right into it. Over to you, Julia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to have you here. Today's topic is a big one: how Google is shifting away from prioritizing websites and what that means for local businesses and marketers just like you. This change is already starting to show up in real-world searches, so we're going to break it down live and talk about how to actually adapt to it. Justin, would you mind kicking us off by walking through a real-life example of how local search is changing?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So what I prepared is a side-by-side that shows on the left how the local search result used to appear, and then how it appears when you're doing the same exact search, but in AI mode. So if you're familiar with local search, you'll recognize that at the top, there's some sponsored businesses. Only about 2% of people click on those, followed by the Google business profiles, which are drawing a lot of attention to the website, followed by a handful of links that are usually dominated by larger aggregators or directories. And so this is the world that we've all been used to for the last few years, where Google really did spread the love between ads, Google business profiles, and websites, although the vast majority of those clicks were going to Google business profiles. And I think that's what informed their decision when it came to figuring out how AI mode is going to work. So the search term that we did here was pest control in Santa Monica, and we did the same exact search in AI mode. And this is what the result looked like instead. It started off by saying, if you're dealing with pest problems in Santa Monica, there are several companies available to assist you. And then it did a short explanation of each of these businesses, which it gathered from a handful of different sources. And you can see that it doesn't match exactly the same rankings as the Google Business Profile results would have in traditional search, but it's fairly close. So, for example, Dewey Pest was showing up number 1 here. Well, they're number what is that, 5 or 6 over here. Beach City Pest Control made it, but you can see H&A Pest Control from the left side did not make it over to the right side. And the really interesting thing here is you can kind of see why Google is choosing these businesses to show you. So one, it's saying that they're offering a free termite inspection and rodent control in addition to general pest control services with a 2-year warranty on products and services. They must have gathered this information from a combination of offers put on their Google profile or mentioned on other social medias, because Google now searches that, or from their website. And you can see as we go on, they really like to mention things like they offer free consultations. So we'll get more into how you might be able to rank higher in these results. But if you keep scrolling, you'll then see the Google business profiles for these businesses that are listed above, and then just more information about pests that might be in in Santa Monica and what the cost to control it might be. So big changes happening in how Google is showing local results. The biggest thing that I would take away from this is that they are not pushing hard on websites. So if I was to click on one of these, Google is going to show me their Google business profile, right? They're not taking you to the business website anymore. In fact, there are no websites at all that you could even click on from the first screen of this new AI mode result. Instead, if you wanted to go to any of these websites, you'd have to click on this, look at their Google business profile, and then click over to their website from there. So a pretty significant change in that they're no longer showing websites at all in local search results. So I'll hand this back over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, it's pretty wild to see how different the results look. So let's dig into what this really means. I've got a few questions lined up for you and Brad. So Brad, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you start. Let's start with the big question. What do you think this means for traditional website SEO?
Yeah, it's going to be huge. First of all, thanks for having me. It's great to connect with you both and have this conversation. As the intro mentioned, I worked at Google for over a decade on GBP, and it's really interesting to see this evolution. And I think it definitely, what does it mean for website SEO? It's going to change a lot. I think that if you're in this industry and you're kind of been subscribing to YouTube channels and threads and whatnot, you've inevitably seen videos pop up that says Google is killing SEO, right? Or SEO is dead, or any of those kind of like clickbaity type labels, right? And I don't know if I would go that far to actually say that that SEO is dead, but it certainly is changing. I think that we're seeing, and the demo was really illustrative in this fact where Google, even at I/O a couple of weeks ago, mentioned that they're moving from information to intelligence. And that side-by-side view that Justin just showed was really illustrative of that, right? Because the left-hand side showed the information. It's like, pest control in Santa Monica. Here is things you need to know, places that or businesses that you may want to contact. The AI mode version of that went a lot deeper into it. So it's like, it's not, they were finding information about that company. The algorithm is actually creating connections between websites and social media and GBP, and like linking all of this stuff together and creating a perspective that it then represents in that AI mode. If you kept scrolling down the page, it then went further to describe these are the types of pests that you might be encountering in Santa Monica, right? So it's being a lot more, expansive in the way that it's kind of like approaching this data. And what's interesting as an ex-Googler, like the when you're at Google, you know, kind of the mission of Google was always to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And every Googler will be able to tell you that, right? It's one of those things that they really kind of like drill into you in terms of the mission of Google. And what's interesting with the release of AI mode, it's contradicting a little bit of that mission, right? Because it's no longer organizing the information and providing 10 blue links that is a reference out to where you can find the information. It's now synthesizing that information and providing it directly available to you, right? It's so to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible is shifting now into reading the world's information and providing the answer directly to you. And so going back to your question, what does this mean for website SEO? It means zero-click searches are going to become more and more prevalent. So what is a zero-click search? It's when someone does a search on Google and finds the answer on that first page and doesn't need to click out, which is a very different philosophy to what Google used to do, where it's I'm gonna find the information on the internet and I'm gonna point you to that. So the click was their currency. It's like, you know, here is where I'm gonna send you out to this site where you can get the information. And so that's changing a lot. And so, you know, for all the marketers out there, you know, agencies that are watching this evolution, your world is about to change, you know, because I think the dependency on backlinking and you know, the traditional SEO methods, while I wouldn't say that they are dead right now, I think that they are diminishing in value. And so the future is really going to be more about brand and mentions, you know, like, and so it's moving from a world that used to be based on links and is now changing to a world of words, right? And so, you know, with the introduction of AI, which are essentially just large language models, natural language processing machines, that they don't need to rely on a hyperlink to know what you're talking about, right? There's a lot more, like, it understands context, it understands intent, and it also understands brands. And so the more that you push brand mentions out into the community, the more you're going to see that reflected back at you in these large language models like ChatGPT and AI mode or Gemini. You know, because both AI mode and AI overviews now are running on a modified version of Gemini 2.5. So it's a great opening question because it's so big. Like, you know, SEO is going to change a lot. It's already changing a lot. And so, you know, I think that what we're going to get into a little bit more today is things that you might need to focus on as that shift and that evolution happens.
Brad, I'm so glad you went first on that question. So yeah, I think Google's really trying to help people come to the right answer themselves without having to click. And I think that's going to cause a lot of ripple effects, which I'm excited to dive into. As far as what it means and like the changes that you should do for SEO, I think it's kind of a continuation of a trend that's been going on for a while, which is that Google is very smart and like they've known about, you know, backlink farms for a while and PBNs and you know, every trick that you could have done to rank higher. And I think that, you know, in the past creating you know, a page on your website for every single city and every single service that you offer so that, you know, an HVAC website that could have and should have 5 pages ends up having, you know, 3,000 pages. And I just think that in this world, it's not necessary, you know, you don't need those pages to now surface in search results because Google isn't showing them. So I think instead of, you know, those traditional website SEO methods of, you know, building tons of blogs and working on backlinks to each one of them, I think it's more about just fine tuning a very tight website that perfectly explains your business and keep it fresh with information like offers. Make sure you have your appointment link, a list of all the services you do. So I think generally it's going to be less of about gaming Google so that your website ranks and more about just make sure that you have all the essentials out there.
Yeah,
because
I have a fun story about that actually, where like it's not surprising that people are even using AI like ChatGPT and Gemini to create content for your websites, right? Like it's never been easier to write a page about a topic and a geo and just match them together and throw them on a website. It's like done, right? Well, so between Q1 of 2023 and Q1 of 2024, so again, this is last year's data, the amount of AI generated content on the internet grew 2,800%, right? So you just think of like the size of the internet is just expanding at a tremendous rate because it's never been easier to create content. You just go drop in a prompt and you got content. So Google sees this, right? They see the size of the internet growing. And of course, what do when they see this amount of content increasing? Well, they make an algorithm change, right? So there was a core update that they made to core search in March of last year, right? March of 2024, where they were actually bragging about the fact that they were de-indexing a whole bunch of quote AI spam, right? And they'll just drop it. So if you had clients that were moseying along great, and then all of a sudden in March of last year they tanked in traffic, I mean, this could have that algorithm update that they did could have been the cause of that. And it's not entirely surprising because they're like to what you were saying, Justin. It's not about volume of content anymore. It's about quality of content. And so what they're saying is that they want the content that you're leveraging, that you're using, to be unique and useful, right? And this is also where the large language models come in, because they're the ones that are determining whether it is unique and whether it is useful. So it's another key indicator that like just creating more pages isn't really going to be a good strategy going forward. You have to make sure that you inject a unique perspective. So, as much as everyone's saying AI is going to kill people's jobs, right? Like, and take our jobs. I mean, like, there's not really a substitute for human investment, right? And human intuition, especially when it comes to content creation. So.
yeah, and I think it's a really good point, and why the Google business profile isn't going anywhere, because it's Google's opportunity to get real human provided information on a business. Because an AI can't decide if a business is running a special for Father's Day or closed on Labor Day, right? Like, they need businesses to provide input.
Yeah, in fact, Google Business Profile as a product of Google gives it a tremendous competitive advantage, right? I mean, like, ChatGPT doesn't have that, right? They don't have access to GBP, right? They don't have access to the Google Business Profile. They're integrating with Bing, so it's like Bing Places is kind of their thing, but like it's just nowhere near where it needs to be. And so Google knows that. Google knows that that is a competitive advantage, and so you can see that represented in AI mode, where a lot of the data that it's using to extract its information is actually sourced directly from what it already knows about your business.
Yeah, we can dive more into this, I think, a little later. I saw an article yesterday that mentioned that OpenAI just purchased some compute from Google, and so they're divesting a little bit from Microsoft, and it makes you wonder if there is a data licensing play for that Google business profile data on ChatGPT. But I think let's circle back to that a little later.
Awesome. This is great, guys. Thanks. Moving on to our next question. With this shift happening, what should people expect to see in their reports over the next coming weeks, even months? Are clicks or calls going to really change?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, most people on this call, if you're agencies, then you've probably already seen this. Like, I mean, clicks are going down, right? And I talked a little bit before about the rise of zero-click searches. I saw a statistic, and it's a little bit dated now. I think the statistic was from July of last year, where it said 60% of Google searches are now zero-click searches. So, like, it's so people will kind of come in, do their search, get their answer now, whether it be through the AI overview or now the AI mode, and bounce, right? Actually don't click on anything. So, even when the business is in the AI overview, clicks are still going down, right? Because it's changing this model where I'm getting more information. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that business is going down, right? It just means that the volume of clicks that you're getting to your website, that as a measurement, is becoming less reliable than it used to be. And I mean, like, clicks has never really been a precision measurement anyway, right? But it's even becoming less so. And the guidance that even Google is saying is like, focus on the business that you acquire, focus on leads, focus on, you know, customers that you acquire. I know that's easier said than done, but I think that the premise is true, which is, you know, even though clicks may be overall coming down, the quality of the clicks that you're getting, hypothetically, are actually a lot more qualified, because there's more information that is being presented to that user before the click, right? So instead of clicking to your website, finding the information, and then either bouncing or converting, that is all happening on the Google page now, right? So you know, clicks will go down. Yes, that's one of the metrics that is going to be impacted. You know, I think looking more into visibility, so like kind of triggering, like thinking a little bit more about GBP as an example, I'd be less inclined to look at the actions that are being taken, right, like the clicks and on all that, but more inclined to look at the grid map, right? So like, how are you ranking, right? Are you showing up in the local pack? Are you showing up in the AI overview? Are you showing up in AI mode? And even then, the reporting on that is horrible at the moment as well. You know, like, I mean, Google is actively working to try and get more visibility for marketers to say, when are those leads coming from AI overview or AI mode? And it sucks right now, you know, and it's difficult for marketers. We're seeing a lot of that traffic show up in brand or direct traffic to websites, which isn't super helpful. But I think that it is going to get better, because I know, like, this is obviously a very big investment for Google, and so they will provide a solution. It's just when. And so, you know, I do expect it to get better. I just like hope it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think, you know, one common theme that I've heard for years from marketing agency owners is just how difficult it is to track attribution from a Google profile to a phone call or a web form submit or someone walking in the door, of course. And I just think that was a challenging problem before, and now it's pretty much impossible.
Yeah.
Because if someone just sees like, here's the best pest control business for you, here's the number, you know, they're going to go and just call that number. And so, like, I don't know, like, to do just back of the napkin math, you'd say 9 out of 10 people go to Google search or Google Maps to find a local business. Is it fair to tell a business owner that wants to know, to some level of, you know, confidence, how good their agency is, that around 90% of the calls and customers that are new that they're getting are from, you know, Google business profile optimization? Or would you say it's actually, you know, a way different number?
I mean, that's hard to tell, right? I mean, like, it's
And the reason I ask is because you know, we hear many reports from agencies that will say their clients, you know, they're doing so well, their revenue is up,
yeah,
but they're still questioning the agency and saying, I don't think what you're doing is working. They're like, well, your business is growing. We
yeah.
just can't, you know, connect the dots for you.
Yeah, I think it's really, my advice would be to start with the business acquisition and work backwards, right? So it's like, you know, are you getting business? Yes. Okay, great. Then chances are that's coming from the agency. Work backwards from that. So like, okay, let's look at your visibility, right? Like, are you visible on the maps? You know, and you know, for local intent queries, right? Because that's the other thing that we haven't really discussed at the moment, is that AI mode is prioritizing informational intent queries over local intent queries. So I think right now it's cheating a little bit by just reserving GBP data. I expect that will likely change over time as well. So like, you know, local intent queries, you know, I think GBP is still the #1 investment, right? Because it's going to show up, you know, if the AI overview is rendered, it shows up in there, but it also shows up in local search. And so showing visibility is important. Showing the actions that are taken through that is important. But I think that driving towards customers acquired, right, or leads generated, is probably where, and I know it's a tough task because like it's, I've been on those conversations with clients where they're like, I need more business. What are you doing? And I'm like, we're doing all these actions. They're generating this result. And then like, it's a very difficult funnel to describe. But, I do think that starting with customers acquired and working backwards is probably the best way to tell that story.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, and of course, on the topic of everybody always wanting to get more business and wanting to be at the top, what do you guys think is going to move the needle the most when it comes to getting a business into the top of this new AI mode?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the $1 million question for agencies, isn't it? It's like, all right, I get it. AI overview is important. AI mode is the future. We hear that. What do I have to do differently, right? And I think that it's going to be more about brand mentions, in my opinion, right? So it's going to be like, how much can your brand be represented? And we hear Google talk a lot about the EATS, like analogy, which is like expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, right? So that's the thing that Google is basically feeding us to say, these are the things that you need to do to get into the large language models. And so, when I interpret that, what I hear is, everyone, it's easy to kind of build experience, right? Like, or show experience and show expertise. The authoritativeness is the hard one, right? And that's the one where, investing more in, like, so there's two parts to this. There's what you say about yourself, and then what others are saying about you, right? And so like what you say about yourself is an investment more into the content that you're writing for your website, making sure that it has unique perspectives and it's not going to be de-indexed by Google because it's, unhelpful, right? So unique content, unique perspective, written to solve a problem, right? Because most of the queries that we see coming through AI mode are very long, right? Like the form of those questions, it's now 30, 40 words as opposed to just like 2-3 words. And so it's got to be more descriptive and more. And if you write your content for your website that answers a particular problem, that's actually giving Google what it wants. It's trying to answer a question for a consumer. So if you write your content from the perspective of answering that question, you're giving it what it wants and you're making it easy for them to reference you. So that's about the content that you control. But then there's what other people are saying about you. And this is where getting reviews in your GBP profile is really a direct source of having other people say nice things about your business. But also, doing things in the community, having PR team kind of like get you local news and brand mentions, right? You don't necessarily have to drive backlinks anymore, but brand mentions are probably the new version of backlinking, right? And so that's where you drive authoritativeness. That's where, in Google's eyes, we want them to say, I have this question coming from a consumer who knows the answer. I'm going to go to ABC company because I trust them and I know that they have, the authoritativeness where I can serve this information and not get sued because it's wrong or hallucinate or whatnot. And so I think that's going to be the key. I think I wouldn't go so far as to say, stop doing what you're doing. That would be dangerous. Keep doing what you're doing from the SEO perspective, but you have to do this as well, right? You have to also invest in brand mentions and investments in third-party mentions. I think that's going to be the biggest bang for your buck.
Yeah, I would agree. I can't remember which update it was, but at some point, generic backlinks stopped being helpful, and instead, for a local business specifically, and instead it was mentions from other local businesses in your industry, right? So if you're a pest control business, a laundromat mentioning you probably isn't going to help. But if another pest control business did, or maybe a supplier in the pest control industry did, that would have a lot of authority. So I think for most local business owners, like getting a mention in the news or anything in a local high authority publisher's platform, I think is absolute gold, like you said. But it just realistically, I think that's extremely hard for so many businesses, and that's why it's, again, to your point, reviews are just the easiest way to build that authority in Google's eyes, and you're going to see, that Google mentions your reviews in the search results when it is related to what the person's searching for. So yeah, definitely keep getting reviews, and if you can, get brand mentions. And I actually wanted to share some data. So every month, our data scientists will go and see what all the top performing and bottom performing um, businesses on our page platform are doing and how they're ranking as a result. And I promised them I'd include these very sophisticated charts, but I'm not a data scientist, so I'm just going to move to the one that makes sense to me. So, off of our latest assessment, which was about 2 weeks ago, these are the different things that you can do on your Google business profile to yield the greatest improvement in terms of absolute ranking. Meaning, if you're ranking number 9 on average in your area before, if you wanted to go to number 1, these are the things that you should be focusing on based on how impactful they are. So the first one is number of reviews in the trailing 90 days. So, making sure that you didn't take your foot off the gas once you hit 100 reviews, you just kept going and going and going, because Google loves recency. The second is the number of reviews with keywords in them. And so Google, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, will surface the reviews that relate to what the person's searching for. So if you're searching for French onion soup in Los Angeles, and a business had a review that said, ABC Diner had the best French onion soup I've ever had, they're going to show your business and that review highlighted on it. So, yep, the percentage of reviews with keywords in them is a very big ranking factor. The next one is image uploading frequency. So instead of just dropping, 10 new images on your Google business profile, it's uploading them consistently without taking gaps in between, to just constantly give Google more and more information about your business. And they do scan them to see what's in the image. And so, yep, they're using that to learn about your business. In fact, I've seen some search results show, I've seen some Google business profiles show up only because an image showed what I looked for. So I think the example was restaurants with a full bar in Los Angeles. And the first one that showed up, the featured image on that Google profile in the search result was a full bar. And I then was curious, so I dug onto that profile and on their website, and I didn't see a mention of a full bar anywhere on their Google profile or their website. And so Google really does take a look at your images and take them into account when surfacing your business. The next one was, interestingly, the number of Q&As on the Google business profile. So most people don't even know this, but there's a question and answer area of a Google business profile where even you as the business owner can ask questions and then answer them. Before, Google would say the name of the person that asked them and then say owner. And then I think they removed that tag. I mean, just speculating, because most people that were asking questions were the owner. And maybe that didn't look great. And then the last thing was active weeks on page. So page does a whole lot of stuff to optimize a Google profile, and the time that you're on it is directly correlated to your improvements. So I just thought that was a very interesting set of data that I wanted to share with you guys today.
Yeah, I mean, and just plus oneing to that study. I mean, like, just from my experience, having run GBP for 10 years, that looks right to me, right? I think that like, reviews is the biggest ROI in terms of ranking. It's not just volume, it's frequency, right? Frequency of reviews is really important. Imagery, yes. In fact, Google has this model that they use. It's codenamed MUM. So like, it's an acronym for, like, multitask unified model, something like that. Basically, it's a fancy word, and all it means is Google can look at images and videos, right? So when you're building out your website or posting imagery to GBP, Google can see that, right? The algorithm can see that. They can see what it is. They can interpret it, and then that is just as good as a review in some cases, right? To your point, Justin, I think that example of the full bar is brilliant, right? Because it really illustrates that it's not just keywords anymore that matters, right? It's all the multimedia content also contributes to this overall perception of your business. So it's a great point.
Cool. And yeah, that search I don't do anymore now that I have a kid. My searches are very different. So I wanted to also
Wiggles
just throw,
concerts and stuff like that, right? So they're not into the Wiggles yet. Sorry, that's the Australian in me coming out. So that's
not yet. We'll get there. All right. So I wanted to also share a link. So we have this free audit tool that you guys can just click that audit your GBP link um, and then just save that for after the webinar. But basically, that'll tell you how optimized your Google Business Profile is. So, yep, you can check that out after the webinar. And I'll also share a link to a free trial of Page at the end if you guys want to check that out.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. Yeah, great way to see where you stand in case you don't know. Okay, so we've talked a lot about some of the tasks that we want to shift gears and kind of focus on. Are there any SEO tasks that we used to prioritize that might now be less important or even unnecessary?
I wouldn't go so far as to say unnecessary. I still think organic search still is valuable, and it still contributes to the overall authoritativeness and visibility of your brand. If I was to say one thing that is not as important as it used to be, link building, I think, is not as important. It used to be the thing that you needed to do: go out and get links. I think Google is getting smarter than links now. They're pivoting towards brand mentions and value of content, frankly, right? So it's not about just writing a page that has a bunch of keywords and links. It's now focusing on user intent. What are they looking for? And does the content actually answer their question? So I think that personally, I think, I wouldn't overinvest in link building. I think that's probably the one thing that is going to slowly fade into the distance.
Yeah, that was my answer as well, link building. I just think Google is increasingly smarter and they're deploying more of their AI to do more of the things that traditional algorithms did in the past. So like they know what's nonsense and what's not. And on that same note, I think there are other like black hat, or let's call it uh, gray area, or just on the wrong side of the area, things that someone would do to try to rank higher, whether it's having a home address verified for their business or a PO box or a number of things. And I think that Google's spam algorithm is so good now that I think everyone's on borrowed time if you were doing something that's against their terms. Before it was definitely easier to game it, and now I'd say close to impossible. Brad, I mean, that was your baby at Google. What do you think about the people that have home addresses where they don't see customers at home? And
this is an interesting discussion, and it's a little controversial because it depends on who you talk to. So like inside the walls of Google, if you talk to the GDO organization, which is the Geo Data Operations team, they would argue what's referred to as ground truth, which is the business exists in a home. It doesn't necessarily need to have signage, but like if that is where that business is operated out of, then it's viable to exist on the map, right? But then if you ask the commerce organization, they're like, is that actually a place that customers can walk up and ring the doorbell and say, hey, I want to engage in this particular, product or service that you offer? And I've seen a little bit of flip-flopping on that topic, to be honest. I think that there's been businesses that have been suspended because they're operating out of a home location. And I've seen businesses that are working fine out of a home location that appear to be not ignored, but like left alone from Google's algorithms. And the difference between the two is really the type of industry that you're in, because there are more higher risk industries than others. And Google I've got plenty of horror stories, which I don't know that I can say on webinars, but like stories of how people are abusing the platform, and committing fraud. And like, I worked with the FBI in some cases on kind of like taking down conspiracies, like, and so there are some industries that are just more prone for that. I think that the sorry if you're part of this community, but like locksmiths, garage door repair, plumbers, like all those types of industries, there's a lot more scrutiny on the changes that you make in your GBP profile, because the risk to Google and someone abusing our platform is a lot higher. That being said, if you're in a low risk industry, you're probably fine with getting away with, kind of like putting your, having your home address. Now, there's pros and cons to that, like where you now have your address on maps, right? So like whether you want that or not is really kind of like more of a personal decision. But like it's, you could probably see that we could talk about this for about an hour, because there's a lot of different ways that we could talk. And I could tell you stories of where it's been fine and stories where it has actually been horrible. And best advice I can give you, I mean, this is where I think, working with industry experts, and I think that's kind of why I think, I have a job as a GBP consultant, is like helping navigate these complexities, because not all like almost every situation is unique. It requires investigation, and I don't have a lot of clients that are restaurants, transparently, right? Because it's very easy. It's like you're a restaurant, you got a storefront, piece of cake, right? But I do have heaps of clients in the professional services industries, because it's hard, right? And there's unique characteristics that make that challenging. So that's
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brad. Before we open it up to our live Q&A, which we're going to get to in just a second, I have one more question for you guys. I know we've talked a little bit about ChatGPT, but how do you think tools like ChatGPT or some of the other ones out there will try to keep up, given they don't have access to Google's local business data?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier. I think that they're actually contracted with Bing at the moment, which clearly gives Google the advantage, I think, because Bing Places is not a priority for people. I think when everyone looks at their traffic, it's like, what percentage are you getting from Bing, right? It's like fraction of a percent. So there's not a real threat to Google there. I think Google is smart in integrating GBP into its AI platform, because it gives it a competitive advantage. That being said, I think there's a lot of areas where OpenAI are ahead of Google, right? Like, and where ChatGPT is better than Gemini, right? Like looking more at informational intent and the deep analysis. You see Google investing a lot in deep analysis. I think they're playing a little bit of catch up here against ChatGPT. But, I think that if your search intent is more local, right? Like, it's kind of like a, I want to buy type user journey. Google's going to be better, right? It has more data than ChatGPT. But I think ChatGPT are ahead of Google in many ways as well. So it's not really, it depends on the user journey that you're looking for, is my take. But they need to do something to improve their local database. I wasn't aware that there was some discussions about, with Google about this kind of like underlying platform. So that's interesting. I find it hard to believe that Google's going to give away their competitive advantage. So I don't know if they're going to allow them access to GBP, but it shows that ChatGPT are looking at this seriously, right? And they need to make a change in order to have that user journey be surfaced in their platform, which today it's not very good.
Yeah, I think all the AI platforms, Google aside, their local queries were just awful. Like it was a combination of directories, so that made citations important again. But it was just such sparse data, because they were also pulling from like top 10 eater lists of whatever city and saying, okay, that's close enough to you. And so I think that is just such a gaping hole on the ChatGPT side, and all these other models, Google aside, that I would imagine that it becomes a burning problem, that maybe they'll pay Google some amount, or Google will be more open to it, because the cloud computing is such an important part of Google's business, that I don't know. I could see a world where Google does license that data out to ChatGPT at a cost, because it's just so important, right? Like AI can't make up any business information. They can't publish offers. They can't upload images. It's just needed. And Bing, like, it's hard enough to get a business owner to go into their Google profile, which is where 90% of people are clicking, to provide good information. Is anyone going to go into Bing and do the same? Or any other platform that maybe ChatGPT or OpenAI creates to handle local businesses. I don't know. I just have my doubts. So I think at some point Google may license that data to another provider. Yeah, we're still in such early innings with AI generally that, who thought we'd be here 2 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, I'd never say never, Justin, but I disagree. I don't think Google's going to give it up. I think they're going to be like, no. That's like, we're in a race here. We're in an AI race, and I'm not going to give you a leg up, right? Because that'll help ChatGPT immensely. So I don't see it, but hey, it depends on how much money they give them, I guess, right?
Money
Well,
does
I
make
guess
the world go round.
I guess we'll have to find out. These are awesome insights. Thank you both. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for Q&A now. I know we've gone over a lot of information. So if you guys have a question, please go ahead and just drop it in the chat, and we'll get through as many of your questions as we can. All right, let's see. I have a question from Randy asking, how do websites fit into this? And is there a future for websites? Is there even a need anymore for local SEO?
Oh, yes, and yes. So like, is there a need for a website? Absolutely. That is your ability to tell Google or these large language models what you want to know about your business. So absolutely, that needs to be a big part of your strategy. And you need to have a content strategy as well to kind of make sure that you're curating content that addresses the things that you want to be representing in AI, right? Like in AI, but and then we mentioned local SEO. Is there a future of local SEO? Absolutely. I think its form factor may change. What's interesting when I ran GBP, like I always considered like the GBP data to be essentially just the database, because if you look at the way that GBP is rendered on search, it's different from the way that it's rendered on maps. Like the buttons are different, the imagery is, everything's different. It drove me nuts actually. And now, you look at it in the AI mode and it's slightly different again, because, the way that it is visualized, the user experience, the UX, is defined by the team that is serving that information. So the AI team is defining it on AI mode, the search team is defining it on search, and the maps team is defining it on maps. And so even though it's the same underlying data, the form factor is going to change. So, is like GBP as a product is way too valuable to ever not invest in. So yeah, you absolutely have to make sure that it's accurate and current. And the review platform specifically, which resides within GBP, is going to become more and more important as third-party mentions, right? And people talking about you. So absolutely on both counts. Yes, you have to invest in your website. Yes, you have to invest in local SEO, unfortunately.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. We had a question asking if social mentions assist with authority. Justin, I saw you said yes to that. Do either of you want to kind of build on how that's a key factor as well?
You want to lead off, Justin?
Do you want to do this one? There's so many questions that I'm just starting to type away and get some of them answered, since we only have
fair enough. The short answer is yes. I think that a big part, and there's some tips that I have for you here as well. So Google is trying to create a link or a connection between various sources on the internet. So there's like, information that it knows about your business, which is like GBP profile stuff. There's your website, which is, information that can grab. There's media mentions coming from news outlets and whatnot, but there's also social media. And so, we've even started to see that this happened after I left Google, but like they're starting to pull social media posts and things and display them directly in the GBP profile, right? Like down the bottom, we're starting to see references there. And so my advice to you is, yes, make sure that you're maintaining a social media presence, but two, make sure that it's linked within your GBP profile, right? So all the major social media platforms have a field, have an attribute in the GBP profile. And basically what you're doing there is you're just making it easy for Google to connect the dots. Like this company is this company, right? And it makes it easy for them to sow that thread through the internet. And so that is a faster way to build authoritativeness and expertise, which is, a big part of the criteria that boosts you up. So not only is it important to have social media, linking them, but linking it directly to the Google business profile is also going to be critical to give Google a leg into knowing more information about you and your business.
That's awesome. Thanks, Brad. Mike wants to know when exactly this AI mode will be the default.
I don't think even Google knows. They and this has always been, I probably shouldn't share this, but this has always been my amazement at, like, so I joined Google in 2013, right? So it was over 10 years ago. And my first product at Google was Google Wallet, or payments. So the Google Wallet wasn't really a thing then. And I remember doing all my research on the payment space, and I'm like, wow, this business is incredible. They must have like all these research departments and marketing experts and all these things, making decisions on what they do and when. And I went into Google, and I'm like, I had a very big Wizard of Oz moment where I pull back the curtain and I'm like, there's just two blokes in a room making these decisions, right? And I'm like, whoa, like this is it. Now, granted, those two blokes are like really impressive, intelligent, amazing people, but like, I think that there's a lot of experimentation going on. And I think that Google is experimenting, I think, on the world's largest platform. And so I think that they've launched AI mode. What's interesting is they've only launched it for personal profiles. So if you're trying to access AI mode through a workspace account, you probably don't see it, because you have to be in Chrome as a personal profile in order to see it. So they are still considering this to be an experiment. All of the language that they said in Google I/O a couple of weeks ago is, this is the future of search. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the learnings from AI mode and integrate it more into the, quote, core search experience. So it is happening. I mean, you should expect to see ads in AI mode in the near future. I saw an interview with Sundar a while ago where he was talking about how the ad revenue, when an AI overview is rendered versus when it's not rendered, is at baseline, meaning Google isn't losing money from the AI overview. And so I think they're looking at that as an opportunity. So they're like, all right, we're going to probably find a way to get more ads involved. So there's a lot that they're working on, and I think that there's a lot of learning that they're doing right now. So the answer to your question is, it kind of depends. I think that if they see a lot of value, this be the new norm. Oh, did I drop? I think I'm okay. Sorry. So it might be the new norm, but if it's not picked up or embraced very quickly, it might take a little bit longer. So it's a bit of a variable.
Sure.
Yeah. There's a really good podcast where Sundar was kind of explaining their innovator's dilemma and how they're going to handle it. I'll try to find that link and throw it in the chat, because it's interesting to hear his perspective. Brad, we're getting a lot of questions in the chat around the importance of AI, of voice platforms, so like Siri and Google Assistant and so on. And so I want you to address that, but also, hey, just for everyone who's putting questions in the chat, if you put them in the questions tab instead, they're more likely to get surfaced.
So voice, right? And I mean, I think I partially touched on this in my prior answer by describing GBP as a platform, right? So it's a database essentially, right? I mean, it's a source of information. And so like the AI assistant, I think, and I'll use Gemini's AI assistant versus the Siri one, because I'm more familiar with it. But it does leverage a lot of that data. So like if you're verbalizing, like, hey, I'm locked out of my house and I need a locksmith, like, who should I call? It's going to source that information directly from GBP. And it's going to provide recommendations similar to the way that it would if you enter into a search. Now, I can't say definitively as to which model of Gemini it's using as its backend, right? Because I know that AI mode is using a modified version of 2.5. I believe they've actually migrated AI overviews to use the same modeling. You can actually go to the Gemini user experience, like gemini.google.com, and use it there, which is the traditional 2.5. I'm not sure which one the voice response is using, but it's all integrated, and it's perceived internally to Google as a database. So all that data is going to be synchronized. So whatever investment that you put into surfacing on visual search will also be rewards that you get in vocal search as well.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think we'll see if Siri catches up, because, Google Assistant's on the Android, Siri is on Apple, and right now it's pretty unusable. And I think that the importance of Siri will depend on if they're able to catch up and what data source they use. They have been investing in their own Business Connect platform to better get information on businesses, but because previously they were mostly using Yelp data. Um, but it's been a very slow start. So yeah, I think we're gonna have to wait and see what happens there. I personally have already changed my shortcut on my iPhone to automatically bring up voice assistant from ChatGPT, so that basically I have that as my Siri, and it's significantly better than Siri. So I'm sure Apple is aware of this and frantically trying to fix it.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Listen, I know we only have a couple minutes left. So before we close out, Brad and Justin, do you guys have any final thoughts or just pieces of advice that you want to leave the group with?
I'll go ahead and start, Justin. I think that I'll end, I think, the way that I started, which is I don't think SEO is dead, but it's definitely changing, right? And evolving. And I think that agencies and marketers need to evolve with it, or they're going to be left behind, right? I mean, the train is moving. You either have to get on the train or you have to watch it go by, right? And so I think that the tips that I would give you, I know I touched a lot on this today, is it's things that are within your control, and then things that you say about yourself and things that other people say about you. And I think that traditionally we've been doing as marketers a good job of telling the story about, from our perspective, like us controlling the narrative. We haven't done a great job of pushing the third party perspective, like what other people are saying about us. And I think that's going to be the differentiator. So investing in reviews, we heard, like, whether it be GBP reviews, doesn't have to be GBP, like other platforms in different industries have different kind of like sources that they use for ranking. Getting in that is important, but also as marketers, just like telling your clients stories and creating a unique perspective is going to become more important than it ever has, right? Because unique content is going to be rewarded. And so you really need to make sure that, you're not just doing, templated based content for every client. You have to find what's unique about that client and celebrate it, right? Really emphasize that. So it's making the world of an agency and a marketer harder, right? It's more work, but that's, I think, by design, because Google is really looking to differentiate these companies, and if they all look the same, they're all going to fade into the background. So that's going to be my advice for being on top of it.
Yep, I like that a lot. And my thought is, if everybody is just spamming the internet with the same generic nonsense, you need to make sure that whatever you're doing really has the personality of your business, and that it's the stuff that Google or that AI can't auto generate, right? So images, get reviews, make videos, do the stuff that is like authentic to your business, and Google wants to show authenticity. So yeah, that's my part, and I'm gonna add something here as well. We're giving everyone that joined this free trial of Page, so skipping the cost of it. You can grab the link to Page first if you want to learn more, or click the button just to get the free trial link. But yeah, so just in that trial, it takes just a couple minutes. Page will fully optimize your Google profile, and then you can see all the other cool stuff that it does. But we take the learnings of what our data shows works best, and we adapt Page accordingly instead of writing generic AI stuff. I also just want to say thank you so much to everybody who came. I started the business about 6 years ago, and our first webinars had about 3 people on them. So to have over 300 people for so long in this was absolutely just amazing. So thank you so much. And if you have questions, you guys can reach out to us or Brad, and we'll be happy to help. You'll also get a replay of this video sent to your inbox shortly. So thanks so much, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you both. And thank you all for spending time with us today. Like Justin said, we're here for you if you have any questions. But have a great day, and we'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Bye.